they switched to using this framework called Laravel, and they did through a couple of frameworks and ended up on Laravel. And so I got to learn from his mistakes and start at Laravel. So Laravel is an amazing framework, and because of Jonathan, I had to get into this. There's classes for absolutely everything that you need for your basic project. So instead of having to write your user authentication, that exists already. Instead of having to write something to encrypt data and store in your database, that exists already. Instead of having to write the database layer at all, that exists already. So you want to switch from using SQLite database, like as a flat file, to using MySQL, to using Postgres. Instantaneous, you can jump to a new system using that exact layout. It uses the PDO modules of PHP, so there's MySQL injection or SQL injection isn't possible because that all filters out because of that. And because everyone's working on the same format of data, everyone's expecting things to be in the same place. It's on version 4, so there's like a huge base of people that have grown up with this and using it from the get-go. So there's lots of Stack Exchange questions, questions and answers, answering the questions you're going to have when you break whatever you've broken. For me, I use CentOS on all my servers because it's a long-term reliability thing. Laravel, for it to work, it needs a newer version of PHP. So that was one thing I had to jump into. So that would be, I'll post this later. So that's how to update your CentOS if you need to do that. And then it's just a couple commands to install Composer, which that's a whole other framework from what I understand. Again, I'm not well versed in this stuff, I've just been playing it. And then create your first Laravel project. You just run your Composer, which basically downloads the latest version of Laravel and dumps in all your dependencies out the gate. So once you run that command, you are up and running with your basic, you have arrived Laravel page. From there, not coming from a model view, an MVC, model view controller background, I had to learn this whole routes thing. So you have your routes, you have your models, you have your views and controllers. And so your routes are your URLs to your pages, for example. So like /tasks would list a task, and then that's going to hit the route page. The route's going to say, how do I handle this? And then you send it to your view. Your view would then pull out what I'm going to show you, and when a user presses submit, then it goes to the controller, which processes what you've just submitted, and all of that depends on the model, which is how all of that relates to the database. Laravel makes all of this extremely simple for how complicated it could be. As I said before, there's authentication layers already ready, MySQL's read and write mirror. For me, we do a lot of distributed stuff. So having the ability to read from a local mirror and write to a farther away mirror that ends up writing back to that read mirror, that allows you to distribute something very easily. And you create all your tables with migrations. So if you create your project as you see it as today, and then you say, okay, wait, we forgot to add this to this table. It's a migration script that Laravel will process, and then you can basically grow your app up and then shrink it back down as you need to do it. So you can have it live in production, say, okay, this field in this table is useless. We add it, we don't need it, we can take that out, kind of thing. But again, it's built for scale, so you can do it as far-reaching as you want. And Laravel, the performance is phenomenal. And then Eloquent ORM does all of your querying. So instead of knowing SQL like you already do, you need to relearn all of that with this Eloquent ORM thing. But now it'll translate to any database layer you're throwing it on. So the client you're working with says, hey, we're going to use Postgres next week. You're like, okay, whatever. It doesn't affect you in any way. You can roll out your database migrations onto Postgres, and continue to work because Laravel is doing that layer for you. So, example of the models for the models will define how the database layer works. So, we've got the task belongs to a user, and then the remote key, the foreign key in the user table is, or the local key in for the user ID belongs to, it knows all of this stuff kind of just happens magically, which is fairly fantastic, but then you run into where it doesn't work properly. But that's when Stack Exchange comes in. And then, but it's very simple to define these models because they've already got everything else. You're just defining the relationships between your tables using plural names and singular names, and if you follow the documentation, you can call whatever you want, whatever you want. So I've got task as my example here. And then my route, and I'm going to go to my domain/tasks, and it's going to find user 1, get all of his tasks, and then it's going to create the view tasks.index, and using those tasks as the variable I'm handing to the view, and then the view basically goes through, and it's plain HTML other than these. Other than these curly braces, these get interpreted as print statements by the Laravel blade controller, and those will basically go through. So you got your ifs, your for each, and all that stuff work as they do in PHP, and you can use plain PHP, but this is like the Laravel way to do things. And this will create your page. So if we were to go to down, this pulls that data out of that table and displays it using Bootstrap and Laravel all in one fell swoop. So from that whole experience working with Laravel, I got to learn all about CRUD, and so that would be your create, read, update, delete, because you're going to create a new record, you're going to read a record, you're going to update one or delete it, and that if you go through scotch.io, they've got full tutorials on Laravel of like how to create your database, how to populate it with something, how to read all that stuff back, which is fantastic, other than the fact that it's all a new browser load every single time you're loading up those pages. So the next thing I took that to was to create handling forms as a single, like, so I basically now I'm creating one single view for my controller, and then, one single view out of my model, and then my controller is just handling JSON data back and forth with jQuery in the middle. Laravel kind of dropped, like for building a website, it's no-brainer, it's fantastic. But if you want the interactivity of your modern app, you want that, you want the AJAX layer happening in between, handing things back and forth from your database. And Laravel is fantastic at it. You don't need to hand everything to like print array or print JSON code array. Now it's just response JSON, and then there's my array, and then it hands back the data from the database. Too much to learn, and now I must rebuild everything I've ever built because it's all terrible. For myself, the next things I would probably be looking into are Sass, but that's more kind of, so that's like structured CSS, so rules based on, so you can do all kinds of crap with that. It's fantastic. Again, more design than I'm really interested in doing. And then PHP unit testing is kind of interesting for me, so that you can push something to your Git repository. Your Git repository, you can do a unit test before it automatically pushes to your site, that kind of thing, so things don't get published automatically if they're broken. And then Gulp is a fantastic way of wrapping all your JavaScript into minified version, doing multiple includes in a single minified file for your site, that kind of thing. And then
And if you're looking to learn more, here's all the URLs for stuff I was chatting about.